opposition in Bahrain wants political reform, which includes giving less powers to the ruling Al Khalifa family. Well, James Bays looks at what may be next on the political horizon for Bahrain.
There are still thousands of people here at the Pearl Roundabout gathered. You can see them there. Many spent the night here, and they've got all the facilities to stay. You can see the food here being cut up for the crowd, water here, free electricity from the generators. Not just men here, but women and children who've come to spend time here to show that they're with this protest. A range of different views among the people here, some talking about a constitutional monarchy, reform of the constitution. Others go much further. They say they want the king and the government removed from this country. They say they're prepared to stay for as long as it takes until that happens.
OK, let's get some more headlines this hour. A drone strike in Pakistan's western tribal region has killed at least 7 people. Intelligence officials say at least 4 missiles were fired from unmanned US aircraft. They apparently targeted a training centre believed to be used by fighters in South Waziristan. It's the first report of a drone attack in the area for about 4 weeks. A suicide blast in Afghanistan's Kunduz province has killed at least 26 people and wounded 36 others. The bomber detonated explosives at the entrance to a population registration office in the country's north. People were queuing for ID cards on Monday. Local officials say all the dead are civilians, including children. The sole surviving gunman of the Mumbai attacks in 2008 is to face the death sentence. An appeals court in India upheld an earlier decision to execute him. Mohammad Ajmal Amir Kasab was found guilty of taking part in the assault, which left 166 people dead and injured more than 300 others. From New Delhi, our correspondent Prada Suri says Kasab still has other options left to overturn the sentence.
It is going to take some more time before the death sentence against Mohammad Ajmal Kasab can be carried out, because under the Indian law, anybody who's been given the death sentence can take his or her appeal to the Supreme Court. That's the highest court in this country. In case the Supreme Court also upholds the death sentence, Mr. Kasab has another option of taking his mercy petition to the president of this country. Now, usually in the past, we've seen in such cases that it's a fairly long drawn-out process. It takes many years before the case can come to any logical end. Mr. Kasab's defense team, of course, have been maintaining that their client is innocent, that he was merely manipulated by armed insurgent groups in Pakistan who asked him to carry out these attacks in India. But the judges at today's High Court in Maharashtra, they were quite clear. They used some very strong language in their judgment. They said that Mr. Kasab was personally responsible for the deaths of 7 people, including a top counter-terrorism official, and that this was not just any attack, but this was an attack on India's sovereignty. Mr. Kasab, who wasn't at the court proceedings at that time, he was actually watching all of this from his prison cell via video conference, didn't visibly react when the verdict was read out.
The world's biggest arms dealers sold over $400 billion worth of weapons in 2009. Well, that figure doesn't even include sales of Chinese manufacturers. Despite a global economic recession, a report from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute found that arms sales had increased by 8% compared with 2008. In 2009, nearly half the top 100 arms-producing companies were based in the United States. They generated just under $247 billion in sales. That's around 61% of the total arms market. 1/3 of the companies were based in Western Europe and generated $120 billion. That amounts to 30% of total arms sales. And less than 1/5 were based in Asia and the Middle East, where they generated $24 billion in sales. That's 6% of the total arms market. Dr. Susan Jackson's one of the authors of the report, an arms industry expert at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. She joins me from the Swedish capital now. Good to have you with us, Dr. Jackson. It's a very interesting picture that emerges from your report. Are you surprised that the arms industry appears to be recession-proof?
I'm not surprised at all, actually. The arms industry tends to have an insulation from immediate impact from things like a financial crisis. There's several factors that lead into this. One being the structure of the arms industry itself.
And I noticed you didn't include China in your figures. Why is that, and what difference would that have made?
Well, we're unsure now what difference that would have made. We do know that there are companies in China that would be in the top arms producing category. One important aspect is we don't have open source data for companies in China, and so we can't include them in the database.
Okay, I mean, the picture that seems to emerge is that either the world is becoming a safer place or it's becoming a more aggressive one.
Well, it's difficult to tell from company figures whether there's more peace or more aggression. What arms sales do tell us is what's happening with companies, and these companies are increasing their arms sales pretty much across the board.
Do you think these sales are for domestic use or are they for exports? Do we know how the sales are broken down?
It depends on the company. Some are exporting to various regions like the Middle East and to Asia. But a lot of the larger producers in the US and Europe focus on their own domestic sales. When you get to smaller producers, for instance, companies in Israel, they're very dependent on an export market.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for your expertise there. Dr. Susan Jackson from CIPRI speaking to us from Stockholm.
Thank you very much.
Let's get all the sport now. Here's Farah.
Thank you very much, Shalene. An official website set up to sell tickets for the Cricket World Cup final has crashed seconds after they went on sale. It's prompted hundreds of complaints from fans hoping to attend the final in Mumbai on April the 2nd. But while the demand to see the final is high, the same can't be said for the match going on right now. Holders Australia are taking on Zimbabwe, and despite the presence of the world champions, the game isn't proving to be a big draw for the locals. Andy Richardson is in Ahmedabad.
Rather a different atmosphere in this stadium than the one we've just experienced in Dhaka for the opening match of the tournament between India and Bangladesh. There's more action out on the streets here at the moment, and already organisers looking at ways of maintaining the crowd numbers for certain matches, thinking of giving away tickets to school children, reducing ticket prices. This particularly evident after a really poor crowd for the New Zealand-Kenya game on Sunday, and plenty of empty seats again here today. As for Australia, they're going into this match in a slightly weird position. For once, they're not the favourites to win the World Cup. That's despite the fact they're still the #1 ranked ODI side in the world. They have the best win-loss ratio of any team in the world over the last couple of years, and they do still have Ricky Ponting as captain. He's making a record 40th World Cup appearance in this game. As for Zimbabwe, they face a huge task. They've not beaten Australia in an ODI since way back at the World Cup in 1983.
It might be a huge task for them, but Zimbabwe should be pretty pleased with their efforts so far. After losing the toss, they restricted the Australians to 260 for 6 off their 50 overs, chasing 261 to win. Zimbabwe are 44 for 3. Claudio Ranieri has quit as manager of Serie A side Roma. It's being reported the club will appoint youth team coach Vincenzo Montello as interim manager. Follows a disastrous result on Sunday when his team let slip a 3-goal lead to lose 4-3 to Genoa. Initially, it was looking good for Roma. After a quarter of an hour, they were 2-0 up thanks to goals from Mexis and Burdizzo. After halftime, it got even better for the visitors as Francesco Totti made it 3-0. But then just a minute later, the collapse began. Rodrigo Palacio pulled 1 goal back. Alberto Pelosci made it 3-2 6 minutes later. Palacio scored his second to bring Genoa level.